Hello and welcome to the live podcast, Win More on Purpose. Today we have Adina Kaplan with us on Is Freelancing for You? What makes a desirable freelancer and how to get there? The agenda, for those of you who are new, we're going to be having a conversation. Me and Mrs. Kaplan, we're all here learning together. You can write down those questions. There will be a Q&A at the end. And for those of you that are here live, you can feel free to put into the chat a question you might have on what's going on in your business, or you could just introduce yourself. What is it that you do? Where it is that you're coming in from today? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yaacov Steinberg. I've been a full-time sales coach for about 5 years now. And when I first came into the coaching space, I noticed that people were able to build 6, 7 figure businesses on their own. They're good at what they do. They're passionate. Some put along the way, they learned how to speak to people, but they'd hit this glass ceiling at some point or another, either because they were making it up as they went along and that'll only get you so far, or because they didn't want to be that stereotypical used car salesperson, feeling sleazy, pushy, having people buy things they didn't even necessarily need. And that's where I came into the picture, helping people to have the right mindset, techniques, skills, and really having that confidence and clarity to know who they needed to speak to, where to find them, what to say to them, how to say it. And thankfully, I've been able to work with quite a number of people that are pretty well known on LinkedIn, be it Chai Fishman, Hudi Blach, Eli Bosch, just to name a few. And thankfully, the people that have worked with me at the 6, 7 figure realm have been able to grow by 50% in the first 60 days of working with me. Those at the 100K realm, give or take, have been able to grow by 150% in the first 60 to 90 days. And even solopreneurs just starting out, even only doing 4K a month, have been able to grow by 240% in the first 45 days. Mrs. Kaplan, really excited to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and let's get this show on the road.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
So Adina Kaplan here. I am a creative copywriter. I write print ads and websites for brands that want to kill their sales without killing the fun. So think personality, fun, human. And I also coach copywriters who are getting started or who maybe even are a bit more experienced, but are facing specific obstacles, be it with the client challenges or with projects. So I coach them through that.
Absolutely amazing. And I definitely have seen quite a number of things that you've been able to put out there, and you're doing a fantastic job. One of the things that I think behooves us to start with is the fact that the first question that always comes to mind is the question that's in the title: Is freelancing for you? Right? So how does someone even know if freelancing is for them?
Okay, so that is a really, really important question that I don't necessarily feel like is spoken about enough. I think that there's a lot of glamour when it comes to the freelance life. So something that people want, and they assume that it's for them, or on the other side, they automatically assume it's not for them. I'm not an extrovert. I don't like selling myself. So it's probably not for me. So can I just give a quick background on how I got started freelancing?
Absolutely. Please
Okay,
do.
awesome. So 4 years ago, I was in social work school, going for my master's in my first year, and pretty miserable doing it actually. And I had started a few years earlier when I was a teacher. I kind of started like a little blog where I would write about my day and write about funny stories that happen. And I would send it to a few people. It really started because after my first day of work, a bunch of people, friends, family texted me, "How was your first day of work?" And I was sick and tired of writing the same thing over and over. So I just decided I'm gonna make a broadcast list. And over time, more people heard about it and they asked to be added. And it was just something fun to do. So one of my friends who would read the blog, she works for Mishpacha magazine. She writes for them. And she reached out to me once and was like, "Adina, you're a really good writer. You gotta like do something about it." I'm like, okay, like, I don't know, what can I do? I'm in social work school. And she hooked me up with her friend, Esther Kurtz. And she said, "Esther's hosting a, workshop for writers. It might be worth it for you to join." So I called Esther, and she told me that she was hosting, this workshop and what it was about. And it was about, writing fiction. And I realized that was very, very much not for me, but Esther, out of the kindness of her heart, said, "Tell me a little bit more about yourself, what you enjoy doing." And when I did, she was like, "Have you ever heard of copywriting?" And I was like, "Actually not." So she said, "Awesome, look it up. I think this is something you can be good at." So that's what I did. Looked it up, how to be a copywriter, and read a few blogs. And I was like, this sounds pretty cool. Now, I didn't take any courses because I didn't really know what was out there. And I didn't necessarily come into the copywriting world in a conventional way. But I kind of just decided, like, let me get started. I'm in social work school anyways. I have nothing to lose. Worst comes to worst, this flops. If I make $50, like, I'm doing great. That's 50 more dollars than I had before. So that was kind of my approach. And I started copywriting and without knowing anything. And I mean anything about being a copywriter, about being a freelancer, about, I mean, really, really anything. So something, and as we go through, the conversation, I'll tell a little bit more about my story, but to go back to your question, just wanted to give some context. How do you know if freelancing is for you? So you don't have to be a salesy person. You don't have to be an extrovert. I would say most of us are pretty uncomfortable at the thought of selling. So selling ourselves, which is something, Yaacov, that you talk about. You don't want to feel like a car salesman. But I would say from my years of doing this, I pretty much narrowed it down to 4 key characteristics that if you have them, and by 4, I mean 3 actually. If you have them, you can make a really good freelancer. If you don't, it might be worth it to work on these skills. So the first one is grit. Um, Freelancing is not always glamorous at all. And there's a really, really large amount of grit and perseverance that you need in order to keep going, especially since projects don't necessarily come right away and it takes a while to build up your name, and it's not always smooth sailing. The thing is that you have to be able to ride that wave. And honestly, most people aren't willing to. They take their failure, their initial failure, as a sign. Okay, I'm clearly not meant for this. And they give up on freelancing. Now, that's really the first thing, is the grit. You have to remind yourself that it's a process. And if you're not willing to ride out that process, you'll never actually make it to the end goal. And the process can sometimes be really, really not fun, which we'll talk about soon.
Right.
Another thing is discipline. When you're working for yourself, you don't have someone down your back saying, did you clock in 9 to 5 today? So you really have to be that person. And if you're going to say, hey, I work for myself, so this morning I want to sleep in and then get coffee with friends, like, by all means, do that sometimes. That's one of the benefits. But do it strategically. And if you're doing it every day and you're not disciplined enough to actually sit down at your desk, be it a desk, be it your kitchen table, your couch, whatever it is, to do the work, then it's not going to happen because you don't have that external motivation. And the third thing is really about confidence. And something that I was taught that really helped me a lot was that you don't need to feel worthy in order to do the work to be successful. We have this idea of, like, you have to be this good at something in order to make this amount of money. I have to really know what I'm doing in order to be successful. You really don't. You can put in the work, even if you don't feel worthy of making X amount of money per month. You can put in the work that you need to put in to make X amount of money per month. And eventually, hopefully, you'll feel it. And just something that I've seen from so many freelancers is confidence sells much more than skills. Obviously, you have to have the skills, and you don't want to be selling. It wouldn't be fair to be selling your clients, the Brooklyn Bridge when you don't have that to offer. But when you show up confidently as an authority, whether or not you feel like it, and maybe you just finished wiping your tears and maybe you're holding in your tears as you're talking and you're going to hang up and bawl your eyes out because you feel so unworthy and so unconfident, I don't care. For those 10 minutes when you show up as an authority, that's going to sell way more than skills. And I've seen that because there are freelancers that will, get to 6 figures relatively quickly, and they might not even have as good skills as the people who are still kind of flailing at the bottom. And that's why, like, it really, really comes down to confidence. So
Yeah.
grit, discipline, and confidence.
And it's an amazing list. I mean, because like I see this, from the coaching side of things, grit I think is definitely, it belongs at the top of the list, right? It's that thing that keeps people going and gives them the ability to have the stamina to be able to do everything else that's involved. But even within that process, I mean, like you said, confidence, when you just start out, you don't necessarily have anything to show, right? It's not just about, we're not here to lie to anybody, right? But we do need to speak in a way that's going to give people the ability to take a chance on us, right? And that's one of the biggest things that I think so many people in the freelancing space just don't understand when it comes to this whole process is believe in yourself, right? Have that confidence that you have what to give because each and every single one of us does, right? Everyone has their own song to sing. And if you're not going to sing it, nobody else is going to do it for you, right? So I think that's an absolutely fantastic list there. What do you think are some of the things, or I mean, but what are some of the things that people should expect going into this?
So, f- something that maybe I should have started all this by saying is that freelancing really isn't for everyone. And for a few reasons. But I'm not one of those people that are going to glamorize freelancing and be like, it is the ultimate if you can get to, to 6K freelancing. Maybe yes,
Right.
maybe not. For some people, for their lifestyle, I know people who freelance and who, kind of ran their own business for years and then decided like, I'm done with this for now. For my lifestyle, for the stage of life that I'm in, it makes so much more sense for me to be working for someone else. And you know what?
Hmm.
More power to them. Like if you're doing what's best for you and not because some hustle bro on LinkedIn said that the ultimate flex is working for yourself, then so that I feel like I kind of should have put that out beforehand. So I'm gonna just say, based on what I've learned, my experience, is that there's the good, the bad, and the unexpected. So I mean, the good is pretty well known. I mean, you have the flexibility to work on your own time. Unfortunately, this whole week my daughter's been sick, so I've been
Oh,
taking off in the morning so I can be with her because she hasn't been going to playgroup, and I've been working my schedule around that. And the fact that I'm able to is something that I really, really thank God for, and say thank you for giving me the ability to be able to have a job where I can have that flexibility because I would be put in a very uncomfortable position otherwise. So there's that flexibility. There's the choices. You can choose who you want to be, what you want to be, what clients you want to work with. And there's also the earning potential that everyone loves talking about. You can get to these crazy numbers per month, and it's true. You can. Um, then there's the less good. So there's the unpredictable income, which I mean, it's the classic starving artist feast famine cycle. Work-life balance. We'll talk about it more, but it's a little bit hard to achieve a work-life balance when your work is your life, and like my office also happens to be my guest room and my laundry room, so it's like very, really have to stay disciplined, to stay at the desk and not to be looking around seeing what laundry needs to be folded, and there's a lot of it. And then there's the discipline, which we spoke about before, but that's something that could be really hard. And then there's the unexpected things that I had no idea to expect, about running my own business. One of them being admin duties, like sending out invoices. It's not so fun. Yeah, you can get a VA to do it eventually if you want to, or you can just do it yourself if it makes sense for you. But I didn't realize how much time would be spent on admin duties and doing just the really, really technical stuff. That's one thing. Another thing is networking. I did not anticipate how much I would have to talk to people, and like really get to know people and immerse myself in this world. The other thing is business development. If you get too comfortable where you are in your business will stagnate and then eventually stop. If you're not consistently working on your business, and I mean, you have to see your business as your own client. So the same way I would put my heart and soul into my client work, I have to be doing that to my own business or I can't expect it to grow. And again, no one's breathing down my back telling me now it's time to work on your business development. So I have to have um, the discipline to do that myself. So I would say the most unexpected things were the how much time I would spend on admin stuff, networking, and just really the business development. That was really huge.
yeah, and I think that I mean each and every single one of those points is so important, especially because, like you said, people just don't realize what's actually involved in having their own business, right? Like the unpredictable, income I think is really big. It's a slap in the face, I think, to a lot of people that go into it with stars in their eyes, thinking that it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And all of a sudden they wake up one day and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that when I have a baby as a woman, I'm not going to be able to have maternity leave. Right. And all of a sudden they're like, now what? Right. And it's something that people don't necessarily think of beforehand, right? The work life
That was honestly my experience almost 2 years ago when my daughter was born. Um, I was so excited to be able to, like, I'm my own boss. I can take off as long as I want, right? Which is great until you realize that no one's paying the rent. I mean, like, I turned to my friends at some
Yeah.
point. I'm like, did you guys know I wouldn't be getting a maternity leave? They're like, obviously. And I was like, I didn't think about that. Like, because I had never had that experience. And it's not something that I even thought to speak with someone else about. So it was just like, yeah, great, amazing. All the good parts, being able to spend more time with my daughter and less time working and blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of come back and you're like, you come back to earth and you realize there are real consequences.
Yeah, and it's a wake up call to a lot of people. I mean, without this podcast being a place for people to find out about it, but I think that so many people just don't realize those pieces. And I mean, first of all, your child should have, a full shalema and feel well really quickly. But all of these pieces, like, I was speaking to one of my clients today, and they're like, well, I wasn't able to necessarily do the work that I needed to do because, my kid wasn't feeling well, yesterday. So all of a sudden it's like, yeah, and that's, the importance of having a schedule and being disciplined. All those pieces play into it because when what are the expected things that you need to do every single day. So when an unexpected thing happens, you're able to move things around and deal with it accordingly. But that only happens when you have the knowledge of that and when you're able to have that discipline and the understanding of what it is that you need to do. So I think these are all very, very important points.
Can I just throw something else in there for a second? Because
Sure,
I think
absolutely.
like that disclaimer that freelancing really isn't for anyone. And I'm not here to play both sides of the coin and say like this is, but really just to expose the reality of what it is. And I just want to say that I never had the experience of working for an agency. A lot of people, creatives, copywriters, designers, they'll start off working for an agency and then kind of build up their own clientele on the side if that's what they want. And then eventually they'll branch out and run their own show. I never had that experience. I wasn't thinking about it because, again, I was in social work school at the time and wasn't really putting all of my eggs into the copywriting basket. It was just like, cool. Again, let's see what can happen, if anything. But there is really something to be said that maybe I should add about, the not as good part about freelancing is that you don't necessarily get that experience that you would get, or I should say, you have to work harder to get that experience that you would get if you were working for someone else or working for an agency, because you're not getting that full picture view of what it's like to be fully immersed in the job when you're kind of figuring everything out for yourself.
Yeah, and I would also add the fact that running a business is something that many times we need to learn from someone else as well, right? And a lot of times I've seen that those that did start off in an agency sometimes have an easier time, depending on the role they had, in moving into that freelance life because they watched someone else do it in a way that hopefully was good, right? Hopefully they did a good job and you were able to learn from that experience to see how do you apply that yourself. So
Right.
I
So
think that
yeah, sorry.
no, go ahead.
So I would say that once I was like maybe 2 months into copywriting and realized like this is something that has potential, I started working under someone doing mostly very like admin kind of tasks, and it was a minimum wage paying job. And I took it on very much not for the money, and very much for the experience because this was working for someone who is very successful at what she does in the copywriting marketing world. And I felt like I had a lot to learn. And, I worked for her for maybe 6, 9 months, whatever it was, again, doing my own thing on the side, making a few dollars here and there, working for her, but more than working for her, really seeing how she did things. And that's, I would say, how I got my agency experience is from working for someone so much more experienced than I was at the time, and
Right.
also hiring mentors, which I'm going to speak about in a little bit. I want to bring up, but when I was faced with a client challenge or a project issue, I had mentors that I would call and I would pay them. Um, but that's really how I got my full picture kind of experience. So it is possible to get that agency experience, as much as you can, but it is much harder if you're not working for an agency.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the best experience is when you actually go through it, right? That's the best way of learning. And I think that one of the things, just moving into the next question here, that a lot of people face within this process, and as you've gone through this, maybe you can share some of that with us, your experiences, so that others don't necessarily have to go through those same experiences. The whole point of having a mentor is the idea of burnout, right? I think so many people they have this really, excited when they get into it and they're going through the process and all of a sudden they realize what's actually happening or things aren't going as, sunny as they thought they would. And all of a sudden there might be like a gray cloud in the horizon. How do you avoid burnout through all these processes? What has worked for you that you can share with everyone here or listening today so that they can avoid that process?
Yeah, so that's an awesome $1 million question. I think that I I can't tell you how to avoid burnout, but I can tell you how to probably mitigate it, and push it off as long as possible, and then hopefully be able to avoid it when it comes. But I do think that to an extent it's inevitable. I haven't spoken to anyone really from any industry, freelance or not, who hasn't faced burnout at some point. There are
Hmm.
just some people who face it much quicker than others. So one thing, and again, I can only speak as being a freelancer, as being a business owner. One thing is really getting comfortable with rejection, which it stinks. It really does. Getting told no, getting shut down is really, really hard. It's painful. But if you can't emotionally detach yourself from that and your entire self-worth is tied up in your worth as a service provider, then I mean that's a one-way ticket to Burnoutville. It really is. I have a friend who is a very talented copywriter, and at a certain point, she decided when people ask her like, "What do you do?" she was going to stop saying I'm a copywriter. Instead, she's going to say, I work as a copywriter. I'm so much more than a copywriter. I'm so much more. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm a friend. I'm a person. I happen to do this. But when the thing that you happen to do is your own gig, it's very hard to take yourself out of it and to not tie yourself up in it. And that's something that you really have to get comfortable with rejection and be okay knowing that even if you are facing failure as a copywriter, as a freelancer, you're not facing failure as a person. This is like such a tiny
Mm.
aspect of your life, and something. I mean, I'm someone that when I go into something, I go 100% in. So again, I didn't know when starting my own business just how like much I would be jumping into it. Um, but I had a real wake up call when on October 7th last year. So now I live in Israel. And my husband went to Shul, Simchas Torah, and he ran home and he said, Adina, I don't know what's going on. There were rumors that a war started, people were kidnapped. And he started telling me what he heard. And I had this moment of panic where the only thing I was thinking of was, I need to get my family to safety. I need to get to a safe room right now. And in that moment, one of the thoughts that went through my head was, my business can go to pot. Now, do I want my business to go to pot? Absolutely not. I pray to God every day that it doesn't go to pot. But in that moment where it was like a real, real wake up call, I realized in that moment, I'm so caught up with work and it is so not important in the scheme of things. I would give up my work in a second if that means being able to keep my family safe. And that was a real, real wake up call. And thank God I don't have that wake up call every day. But it's a moment that I'll always remember as being that kind of like moment of aha, that inspiration, that moment of truth where I really remembered in that moment what was important and what was less important. So that's one thing, really being able to detach yourself from your work. Another thing is to do things that excite you, do things that light you up, whether that's in work, whether that's not in work. If I mean, I love writing ads, right? So when I do ads for clients, it totally lights me up. And if I don't have particular, let's say, ad work to do for a client, I'll write spec ads. I'll write an ad that I wish I would see in the newspaper. Like, you do things that light you up. And then also in your personal life, get a coffee with a friend, go to Pilates. I don't know. Do what works for you, but do something that your life is so much more than your work. That's really also, I see for myself that when I've seen that the longer I go kind of neglecting my needs, whether that's in business, whether that's personal, the quicker I get to burn out. And another thing is make industry friends, because I have a really close knit group of friends in my personal life. Um, I still won't talk to them about my work the way I'll talk about it with my industry friends, because they don't get it like they do. The same way that my friend who's a nurse can, talk about nursing with her friend, and for me it would be like blah blah blah, I have no idea what she's talking about. I'll be there for her, but I won't be able to really be there for her in that way. So when you make industry friends, and sometimes that's as simple as reaching out to someone and saying, hey, you do what I do, can we get a coffee? Like, put yourself out there. Again, get comfortable with rejection. Maybe she'll say, no, I don't want to get a coffee with you, but chances are they probably will be okay getting a coffee. And once you make that connection, then you're already not in it alone, because the truth is that freelancehood could be a really lonely journey if you don't have your people to support you. And one other thing I would just say about avoiding burnout is really being able to get to the bottom of your self-doubt. Because self-doubt is everywhere. Everyone, like those really, really cool, awesome people that you see on LinkedIn who are killing it, I have no doubt that there's self-doubt there. There has to be, because we all are, and there's no one who's beyond self-doubt. And I was just listening to a podcast yesterday where the person was talking about how she overcomes self-doubt. And she was saying that when self-doubt comes, and this is a really, really popular author, best-selling, New York Times, all the good stuff. And she said that when she sits down to write a book, she still has those thoughts like, maybe I have nothing to share. How am I going to do this? And she says to the self-doubt, thank you for coming. Now's not a good time. I'm working. And that's just what happens. You acknowledge the self-doubt and you say, like, I'm going to do it despite feeling unworthy, despite feeling like I can't, despite feeling all the self-doubt. It doesn't matter. As long I just have to do it. And that's really, I would say, a big part of like avoiding burnout as well. Getting to know your self-doubt and getting really comfortable showing it the door and then slamming the door behind it.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, there's a lot of really good points there, but I think that a couple of points that I would, just reiterate on is, I mean, that detaching, point that you made, it is super important. I mean, in sales, we talk about the idea of detaching from a sale. I think it's extremely important for people to realize, not to wrap themselves up in not just what they do, which is, one of the pieces as well, but also in every single interaction that you have, right? When you attach yourself to it, it's, in sales, we call it commission breath. That, like, people feel like you're trying to get a sale as opposed to trying to serve them, help them, and really be there for them. And that's all connected with the whole detaching piece, right? There's a lot there. Also, in the sense of taking care of your needs, I think that it's an extremely important point. I've seen that in myself as well. It's when I'm taking care of my body, when I'm making sure I'm getting good sleep, when I'm making sure that I'm, doing things that I like to do that give me energy, then I do a much better job in my business, as opposed to when I'm just trying to push and just, continuously move forward without taking those breaks that my body really needs to be in optimal shape, to be in peak performance. And that self-doubt piece. I mean, those are the, three of the big things that I wanted to talk about. But I mean, with self-doubt itself, I love, what it is that this person said, but it's so true in the sense that in any type of, instance, when we have resistance to anything that we're doing, giving empathy, validation, and then, saying, hey, look, I'd love to have this conversation with you, not now, right? That those are amazing techniques that, if some of the things that I speak to my clients as well, when it comes to some of the things that we do, when I'm coaching with people. But it's so important to not glaze over and just, shove things under the rug, because that's when it'll just fester and become a much bigger issue down the line, as opposed to dealing with it in like a 2-minute interaction, on the spot or later on. So I think those are, a couple of really important points that I just wanted to, go back on, with my own experience. I think that one of the things that I've definitely heard from people in the freelancing space is this concept that people look at them as a dime a dozen, right? There's so many people that do what I do. How do I differentiate myself? How have you seen, or what are some of the experiences you've had that have helped you to do that for yourself?
So the first thing is to acknowledge it's true. There are a lot of people who do what you do. But, and even as I'm saying this, I'm like, it sounds so cliche. Anytime anyone's ever said that to me, I'm like, okay, save it. But no one's going to do it the way you do it. And it's true. The same way when you walk out in the street, you don't have to work so hard to look so different from everyone else, because you naturally do look different than everyone else. It's the same thing. If you show up as yourself, you're not going to be exactly the same as everyone else. If you're so busy trying to sound like her and trying to sound like him, yeah, you will be a dime a dozen, because they've heard it before. If you show up as yourself, I'm me and I have the experience that no one else has, because it's my unique experience. Even if you took a course, and even if you, went through a cohort with 200 people, you're still not all coming out the same people. And I think that you need to figure out what you do differently, figure out what your value is to your clients, and then shout it from the rooftops. And it's really uncomfortable. And I'm scared of heights, but get up there and shout it from the rooftops. Make sure everyone knows why they want to work with you and not with someone else. And I think a big part of it also is a dime a dozen. You have to stay consistent even when you're not seeing results, right? So let's say my platform um of choice is LinkedIn. That's where my people are, that's where my clients are, and that's where I try to show up consistently. Now if you'll go back on my LinkedIn, you will see that I've definitely gone months where I was super inconsistent, and that's something that I work on. But you have to realize that when they say consistency is key, again, it's one of those things you're like, consistency is key, but it's true because right now you might be doing the same thing as 100 people that you know. Like I can look around and name probably 100 people who are copywriters off the top of my head. In 5 years from now, how many of us are still going to be successfully doing it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be 100. I'll honestly be surprised if it's more than 50 because it takes that grit, it takes that discipline, and it takes that consistency to really stay, so the people that you see at the top, they started off with 500 people and then it was four and then it was three, two, one. And now there's just them. So you only see them, but there are so many people who fell off the bandwagon on the way because they weren't willing to be consistent. So just coming back to your question about being a dime a dozen, I would worry less about people thinking I sound like him or sound like her, and be much more busy making sure that the content I'm putting out and the work that I'm doing is 100% me. Because when you're so busy looking at what other people are doing and not focusing enough on what you're doing, then that's also a really good way to, you know, feel burned out. And one of the other things that I was just thinking is that I've unfollowed people on LinkedIn who don't, like a kind of like Marie Kondo it, and unfollow people that don't spark joy. And they could be the most talented people in the space and they can be giving the most value. If something about them makes me feel like I'm not enough or I need to be doing more, or it just gives me anything but like an inspired feeling, they're not someone that I want to be connected with right now. And it's nothing about
100%.
them. It's everything about me. And my job is to take care of myself. And if I don't take care of myself, then I'm going to get burned out faster. So if I see that there are certain people, when I actually have a really, really close friend in the copywriting world now. I mean, she's a really close friend in the personal world also. But she said that when she first got to know me on LinkedIn before we knew each other, she had to unfollow me because there was something about like, it was making her, she felt like the stuff I was putting out, it was like, why am I not putting out that content? Why is that not me? And she's like, and I unfollowed you. And then I met you in person and I was like, why the heck did I do that? Like, hello? Like, do you know me? And that really resonated with me because I do the same thing to people all the time. And
Right.
until like, I feel like your content sparks joy, if it's bringing me down in any way, it's not for me right now.
Yeah, and I think it's an extremely important point is the fact that like in a big way so many people, live, their life through Instagram, like looking at other people and watching, oh, they're so successful, I wish I was so successful. And that consistency piece is really that key. You know, you do this yourself, and I know that I do this in coaching, is the sense that our job in essence is not to get results. The job is to do the correct actions consistently every single day that can lead to those results. And then the results are up to God. This has nothing to do with you. It's not your job. Your job isn't to get results ultimately at the end of the day. Right. So, one of the things I think that so many people forget is they get wrapped up in this process of, I need to be the one to provide, I need to be the one to get those results. And they forget that you can't get any results. You can't control how someone else is going to react to anything you say. You can't make them take a meeting with you. You definitely can't make them hire you. All you could do is put your best foot forward in your own unique, authentic, real way. And they're going to respond to that. And those that are attracted to you will come. Those that are not will go. Right.
My
And
father always says that. He says, we're not in the results business. We're in the efforts business. We're in the jobless business. And ultimately what comes from it, we have no control over anyways. So
exactly. And I think that it's such an important piece that you're mentioning. I think another thing that I hear all the time is, and I experienced this as well when I first went into the coaching space, is people always want to know, have you ever done something like this before? When someone's just starting out, how are they supposed to answer that question?
So it's a great question. I want to just continue with my journey a little bit because it plays very well into this. So once I decided that I wanted to be a copywriter, I messaged someone on LinkedIn who was a copywriter, and she sounded friendly enough from her name, literally from nothing else. And I was like, hey, I want to be a copywriter. What do I have to do? We ended up becoming super close friends, and she had patience. But I decided to just go on LinkedIn and post. Now, I think the mistake that a lot of people do is that they spend the first 3 years lurking on LinkedIn and seeing what everyone else is doing. So then by the time, I mean, LinkedIn becomes this huge, huge, scary monster. And then by the time you write that first post, it's like you feel like you've just done something insurmountable, which you really have, because for 3 years it's been building up. But I didn't do that. Again, I didn't know enough to even do that. So my unsavviness really did serve me in some ways. And at some point, I just decided, okay, I'm writing a post. And I wrote a post about how I'm a copywriter. I introduced myself. And I was very honest. And I was just saying how like intimidating it is to be on LinkedIn when I still feel like, when I feel like I'm surrounded by all these people who have their lives together and are saying all these professional things like, it's great connecting with you. Like, I'll never say that in my real life. It's great connecting with you. And I'm still out here trying to figure out how to make a hard boiled egg that when you peel it, it doesn't look like a carcass, you know? And like, this is what I'm writing about because I didn't know better. And my first post got like over probably 300 reactions to it.
I
And I
remember
didn't
that
even know
first
that that was
post.
like something cool. And my friend who was on LinkedIn was like, Adina, that's crazy. And I was like, I don't know, like what's the average? Again, I didn't spend time lurking, and that really, really helped me. So someone reached out, someone who's actually very well known in the branding world now, and reached out and was like, hey, I love your voice. Can you send me some samples? And in my head, I was like, LOL, no, because I didn't know what a copywriter was 24 hours ago. I have zero to show for myself. But
Right.
that's not what I said. Instead, I said, thanks so much. I'm honestly super new to this and I don't really have much to show for myself, but I'd be happy to do a project for you pro bono, so you can get a sense of my skill. And, you know, we can see if we want to work together. And he gave me an ad project and I did it. I am so happy that I don't have the file now because I would probably cringe myself to death if I saw what I wrote then. But I did it and he saw it. He saw potential and he was like, awesome. And he hired me on retainer. Now, he did fire me 2 weeks later. And we've since spoken about it and we've since laughed about it. But that was my first job. And already, once I came out of that job, I was like, oh, I'm no longer an inexperienced copywriter. I have experience. Now, my experience was a half baked ad, but I had something to show for myself. So, something that I think you have to keep in mind when people say, have you ever done something like this before? They want you to be honest. Don't show up as the person that you're not. You know, I've been on calls where they said, "Oh, have you ever heard of this?" And I'm like, "Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm." Meanwhile, I'm like, I had a client once say the word draconian. I had no idea what that meant. I never heard the word before. And as they're saying it, I'm like Googling, what does draconian mean? And they were like, draconian is not a word. Do you mean draconian? And I was too nervous on that call to say, like, I'm sorry, what did you say? Can you explain yourself? You know, and people are so busy trying to show up as a professional with what they think a professional should look like, right? A
Right.
professional has to understand this space and has to understand this space. And people so much rather honesty. Now, if you're going to say, no, I've never done this before, oh, shucks, like, okay, I guess good luck trying to find someone, then that's not the way to go. You have to be strategic, but honesty plus strategy will take you a long way. So if you are honest and you say, you know, they say to you, hey, have you ever done work in the healthcare space before? And you're like, honestly, no, but I'm super interested in it. And my process includes this and this type of research that, you know, by the time we're done with the project, I'll know your business as well as you do. You show up confidently and you show up explaining why, sure, you don't have it, but you don't have to have it in order to be successful. And the worst thing you want to do is back yourself into a corner where you say, yeah, sure, I have experience. They say, can you send it to me? And you're like, no, I signed an NDA. Like, no, you didn't. You've never done it before, you know? And usually they can kind of
Right.
see through that too. So just be honest, be yourself. People are attracted to people. People want to work with people. And I am so much more willing to give a service provider a chance, even if they've never done it before, when they're honest and was like, never done it, but let's give it a shot.
Yeah, and I think I mean there's so many pieces here, but I think jumping into it is extremely valuable in the sense that when you don't know, there is no bar. You literally should not be setting the bar anywhere because you have no idea where it belongs, right? So kind of you jumping into it, and like I was floored when with your first video that you had put up because it was so different. No one had done it before, and you didn't know what anybody else was doing when you first came on the scene because, like you said, you didn't lurk around and watch what everyone else was doing and try to learn what does everyone do. You just were you, right? And I think so many people, like you said, they try to not being authentic is just being real, straight up you. And I think that one of the mistakes, like you said, that people make is they try to understand what does everyone else want them to be, and then they try to become that version of themselves, which isn't really you anyways. So that's not really helpful for you. It's actually counterproductive. And I think the other piece is this idea of doing pro bono work. I think so many people take for granted the idea that you could, as a web developer, send someone a sneak peek of what their homepage could look like in a refreshed website that you can make for them, or an ad that you can make for them. And they don't realize the value that that really brings to the table, where they're like, oh, wow, like I never thought it could look like something like that. Yeah, they might turn around and show it to the person that's doing it for them now. And they might never hire you, but on the other side, they'll never hire you if you don't pick up the phone or send it to them to begin with, right? So you're not losing anything, right? It's the same ideas people say to me all the time. They're like, "Oh, but you put so much value on LinkedIn. How could it be? Aren't you concerned that, people are going to take your stuff?" I'm like, "Well, first of all, anybody who can learn from me, absolutely fantastic. That's why I'm doing it. Those people aren't my clients anyways, because if they could take what I'm putting out there and they can implement it,
Right.
they were never going to hire me as a coach." And the same goes for everybody else as well, right? It's only the people that need help from an implementation perspective that are going to need, someone like myself to step in, help them really understand the information and then, move it forward from there.
Yeah.
So I think those are, also very important pieces to point out. Let's get a little technical for a minute here. How does someone practically start as a freelancer?
So the first thing is don't be too proud to pitch. This is a conversation I had with someone a while back, where we were talking about like, selling our services, and it came out that my ego was really, really getting in the way. And um, this person said to me, he said, "Do you want to have your ego intact or do you want to pay rent?" And I was like, I kind of want to pay rent. It's a little bit more important, And realizing that pitching people is not an act of weakness. And that took me a while to really learn. When you are confident or can show up confident in the value that you provide, when I come to you, Yaacov, and I say, "Hey, I have this service. I really think you can benefit from it. Let's talk about it." I'm not coming to you groveling, saying, "Please hire me, please hire me." I have to put supper on my table. What I'm saying is that I have something that you can benefit from. So like let's talk about it. And it's from such a different perspective. So when you're first starting out, you have to pitch everyone. Talk to your relatives, talk to your friends, that one great aunt that you haven't spoken to since Hanukkah 2008, but she has a business. Call her up. Like, do what you have to do to get those first few projects, because until you have those first few projects, there's really not much you can show for yourself. And if getting those first few projects means doing it for free or doing it for exchange for a testimonial, you have to realize that at the start of your career, at the start of your freelancehood, the experience that you get is so much more valuable than any amount of money you can get. So if I make $15 on my first project, but now I have two solid projects to show for it, sure, I made $15. That's not, getting me down the block in gas, but I now have two projects to show for it, and I have a raving testimonial from my client. So already you're bringing yourself out of it. So the first thing is really to pitch everyone and be okay. Don't let your ego get in the way of price. Know your value, but don't be so busy knowing your value that you never get your first project because you're waiting for someone who's willing to pay top dollar. You have to recognize where you are. Be honest with yourself. I'm not there yet. I will be there at some point, and then there's no way I'm doing a project for $15. But right now, while having a project in my back pocket is more important than making $200 off a project, you kind of just do what you got to do. So that's one thing. Another thing is figure out where your audience and be there. So that maybe that's LinkedIn, maybe that's Instagram, maybe that's Facebook, maybe that's at networking events, maybe it's at trade shows. I don't know what you do. I don't know where your audience is. I know where my audience is. My audience is on LinkedIn. So that's where I am. And I'm showing up there because that's where they are.
Right.
And the other thing is you really have to showcase your skills, showcase your abilities. So if you say to yourself, I'm working, like, I'm a freelancer and I'm working 25 hours a week, and you never get that first project, what are you doing with those 25 hours? What are you doing? Well, you have no excuse. You should be sitting down and creating content, creating work that showcases your skills. Because those are 25 hours that you're not just going to throw away and say, oh, you know what? I mean, you might, which is not a good thing to do, and say, I don't have work to do, so I guess I'll just take this week off. No, do something active that could bring you that work. Create, like you said, developers, show someone what their homepage could look like. If you don't have clients, make up clients. Do whatever you have to do to show people that you have something to bring to the table. And this is something that I really, really believe very, very much in, knowing your worth, but not letting your ego get in the way of getting your first jobs, because if you never do it, you never do it.
Yeah, and I think also there's two pieces there. One, obviously, when it comes to pitching, obviously you want to talk to everybody you know and do it in the right way so that it doesn't, like, push people, back, right? You want to go through that process, not in like, hey, I'm a freelancer, you want to hire me, right? You want to go through it in the right way, obviously. But in showcasing, I love what you just said in the sense that if you don't have what to do, create something, right? You don't have to necessarily have had an actual client that hired you to do a job. Like you said, you love to do ads. So on your, quote unquote spare time when you're not really busy, you might just go and say, okay, what would I like to create an ad for? And just go crazy with it.
Or
Right.
even when I am really busy, but I have a sick idea for Zoom and Zoom is not calling me up and finding me in my little hole in Jerusalem and saying, hey, do some projects for us, but I have a great idea. So let's do this and make it fun, because this is the kind of stuff that lights me up. You don't even if you are super busy with work, still showcase your skills, whether with real client work, whether with fake client work, it doesn't matter. You need to show up consistently, showing people I bring something to the table.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Let's delve a little bit into work-life balance. We mentioned earlier that we were going to come back to it. What have you learned about achieving a healthy work-life balance?
I would say the biggest thing I've learned is that it's really, really hard. It's really hard, and anyone who tells you isn't is either a saint or is lying to your face, because I don't. I mean, it's a constant work in progress. Um, I think it comes down to doing really small things sometimes. So let's say if I know, let's say in the morning I work from 9 to 12. From 9 to 12, sure, my laundry is 3 feet away. I don't think about laundry. I may as well be in like a shared workspace in Timbuktu, because my laundry is nowhere to be found. Right now, I'm 100% focused on work. And the same thing goes the other way. I recently got a new phone, and on my old phone, I had my email hooked up, and I had my work email, my personal email, and it was great. I saw things as they came in. And then as I was downloading the Gmail app on my new phone, I logged into my personal account, and then I was about to log into my business account. I'm like, why? Why are you doing this? Who cares? You're going to sit down at your computer every day and check your emails. I promise you, the world is not going to end because you didn't see your client's email right away. And you know what? I love it. I love that when I sit down at my computer every day, I don't know what came in. I don't know. And sometimes it surprises me for the good. And sometimes it's like, oh, wow, did not see that coming. But I don't have it on my phone. And that's amazing, because if I am sitting with my daughter playing and I go on my phone to check up a recipe, I'm not going to get sidetracked by a client responding to something or an inquiry or anything else that is work. So when you dedicate things and you say, my phone is for personal, my office is for business, then that to me is the best way to actually achieve that work-life balance. And also, what we said before, make friends in the industry. People who don't do what you do will not understand the specific struggles that you face achieving that work-life balance. So learn from them. Talk to people who do what you do and figure out how they do it and steal their ideas, because, you know, no need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, and I think that point you made, I mean, it's something that I recently did myself, in this idea of creating those boundaries for yourself in terms of what is it that you want to allow into your personal life outside of work. Um, right, it was right before Sukkot. I decided that I was going to start leaving my smartphone at my office. Um, I walk around with this cute little non-smartphone, and it's I was very itchy and uncomfortable, and withdrawal symptoms and all that. Like, I don't know what's happening, and I have such FOMO. I love it now. Like I have no clue.
Yeah.
And I spoke to all my clients about it and I said, look, like I'm pretty much available during these hours anyways, and I'm not supposed to be available out of those hours because I should be sleeping or spending time with my family. It's okay that I'm not going to be available. And thankfully, I don't deal in emergency services. So if there's an emergency, call 911, you'll be fine. So ultimately, when we are willing to stand up for ourselves, others are going to do the same, right? I spoke to a client today who's a freelancer and she accepts phone calls. And I said, can I ask you, why do you accept phone calls? And we had a whole conversation about it. And I said, it'll be much better for you probably if you only did email, right? It's like, yeah, but some people just won't. I said, so then those probably aren't your clients.
Right.
And we had a conversation about saying, like, look, from now, you are going to start telling people, I'd really love to talk about this. Can you please send me an email? I need a paper trail so that I can make sure that I don't miss anything and so that I
Mhm.
can keep myself, accountable and make sure to do this at a time when I'm going to be giving you my best work. Right. It's
Right.
about giving it that positive spin, not like I can't talk to you right now because I need you to send me an email, but I want to make sure to give you my best work and, make sure that I can see whatever it is that you're saying. So there's no miscommunications.
And people
It's
respect that.
exactly.
People
And
don't
it's,
respect the people that are always on their phone and like the hustle bros
they
who
take
are maybe,
advantage of you
no,
because
you
you
don't
let
respect
them.
that. Totally.
Um, yeah, let's delve into something I think that most people don't talk about, but I think is really important. How does faith play a role for you as a life in the freelancer?
Okay, so this is something I'm like super passionate about. Um, I am obviously an Orthodox Jew, so faith plays a huge part in my everyday life. Um, Something that I started doing, I would say about 2 years ago, is before I even turn on my computer or look at my work, I try to say Parak Chaf Gimel, Chaf Gimel in Tehillim, which is Mizmor David Hashem Roi Lo Achsar, and it's supposed to be a school for Parnasa. And it's something that just reminds me. So that's usually the first thing I do. I sit down and my fingers are itching and I'm already like going to turn my laptop on and I'm like, don't do it. Just focus for half a second. The next thing I do is I really thank Hashem for my job and tell him what I want. So I'll thank him and I'll say, thank you, Hashem, for giving me a job that I'm good at, that I enjoy doing. Thank you for giving me the experience, for helping me have built up a business, and for letting me do something that really gets me excited. I'm so, so grateful. I recognize this is not something that everyone has, and I want to just take the opportunity to thank you. The next thing is, Hashem, I want to continue doing this. I really, really enjoy this. Please send me the clients that I need. Send me the work. Send me my ideal clients, because I don't want to be doing scrappy little jobs that don't, do anything for me. Send me my ideal clients so that I can continue doing what I do with joy, and I can continue helping people, and I can be there for other copywriters and other freelancers and share from my experience and really like bring him into the experience. When I've worked for people before on salary, and it's very easy to forget where the money's coming from because it's coming from the big boss. Obviously, he's the one that pays my bills. And then you start working for yourself and you realize just how lost you are without faith. And it's like, because you don't have that security. Now, P.S., you didn't have that security when you were working salary either. If you're honest with yourself, God was just as much in charge of that as he is with what you're doing now. But
Yep.
you feel it a lot more as a freelancer. And another thing that my husband and I started doing a while ago, and we have our on times and our off times, is we learned the Beis Halevi on Bitachon. There's a beautiful interlinear with stories and different explanations, really just to work on your faith. And I have seen how learning that has really, really transformed my business and transformed my viewpoint. So for me, faith plays a huge, huge role. And I would say it just starts with starting off my day, starting off my work day, reframing what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Hashem, I'm doing this because I want to support my family. I want my children and my husband to have everything that they need, and me too. That'd be nice too. Um, and really just being very, very honest and realizing that like he is the ultimate business partner. So stop leaving him out of it. You don't leave God at your office door. Welcome him in, thank him, ask him for what you need, and just remember, like, and I'll even do sometimes, I'll visualize like my dream clients just coming to me. And I just remember like these huge, huge corporations, if God decided that Google wants to locate me in the Middle East, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in on the map until they find little old me in my home office. That can happen because he's in charge of all that. So really just understanding who it all comes back to, and then being very comfortable welcoming God into your workplace and realizing that you only stand to benefit.
Wow. That was super
I
inspirational.
said this is something I'm really passionate about.
No, that was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I wrote down some things that I need to start doing, but I mean, like, wow, just wow. I'm not even going to. No. That was absolutely amazing. I think I want to open the floor to Q&A. I know that a couple of questions came in, but while I'm waiting to see if anybody else has anything they want to add, as a business owner today, what would you go back and tell yourself when you just got started out? And I would also add to that, do you have any regrets about the journey so far?
The first thing I would say is get comfortable with yourself. Be nice to yourself. At a certain point, I turned around and I still find myself doing it sometimes. And I've thought if I spoke to any of my friends the way that I talk to myself sometimes, no one would come near me with a 10-foot pole, and for good reason. And a while ago, I was feeling very down and I realized like it was a lot of negative self-talk. And I did this thing. I printed it out. I have a board on top of my desk. So I printed out a picture of me with a horrible haircut. Thanks, Mom. At
I've
eight
seen
years
this
old.
picture.
Exactly. And I wrote some, you can call it affirmations, you can call it whatever you want. I'll just read them. It says, I deserve kindness, speak nicely to me. I have so much to offer. I'm doing my best. Be proud of me, nurture me, raise me up with kind words. I'm so valuable. I can do anything. I will accomplish great things. And I love me so much. And this is something that at a certain point, I would read this out loud every single day like a crazy person. But the truth is that it's very easy to be mean to 28-year-old me. It's really hard to be mean to this. I wouldn't want anyone talking to my daughter the way that I talk to me sometimes. I wouldn't
Right.
want anyone saying these nasty things to my younger self. I want to just hug my younger self and say, you are so precious. You are so delicious. You are so valuable. So that's something that, like, if it means printing out a picture of yourself with a goofy smile and writing the things that 28-year-old you needs to hear, that, we're a lot nicer to ourselves when we are not talking, we're a lot nicer to other people than we are to ourselves. And I think that that's really something that I would go back and tell myself, like, put in the time and effort to really learn how to, like, be your own business partner, your own best boss. Because I've thought before, like, you can be a solopreneur and run your own business and be a one-man show and still have a super toxic work environment. And I've seen it for myself. And I know, it doesn't feel good, but it doesn't feel good because it's true, And I realized for myself, when I'm not in the right headspace, it's a really toxic work environment. And that's not fair. I don't deserve to be subjected to that. So just like I wouldn't let a boss talk to me like that, I'm not going to let my boss talk to me like that. So that's really something that I think is really important for everyone. Obviously, it's a lifelong work in progress, but when you're starting
Sure.
out as a business owner, as a freelancer, recognize that this will come up a lot probably. So put in the time, do what you have to do. And the other thing is, um, find mentors. Like, I know for myself, I mentor newer copywriters, or, like I said, not even just newer copywriters. Um, there's someone on LinkedIn that I met, and when I saw her, I was terrified of her on LinkedIn, and I was just like, I'm never go near her. And then one time I was going out for coffee with a friend, and she said, "Oh, can we invite her?" And I was like, "No, she's terrifying." I met her. We're super close friends now. She's not terrifying. I built her up in my head to be this really, really scary thing. Whereas most people, if you just send them a message and say, "Hey, I'm starting out. Hey, I have this question. Can you help me?" Yeah, some people will say, sure, pay me for my time, but a lot of people will just say yes. And I've gotten on so many calls with copywriters, what's 20 minutes to me? I started my career, and the only reason I was able to get to where I was out of the generosity and kindness of people's hearts. So for me to be able to pay that forward, I love doing that. It's my way of saying thank you to Hashem for getting me here. And it's my way of showing people that, like, people want to help. So don't be scared to approach people.
Amazing. Absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I mean, it's really important when it comes down to, I think, the fact that you said being nice to ourselves. And I love that line. You can make a toxic workplace by even within the freelancing world and working for yourself. And I think the mentor piece is really important. I mean, myself as well. I mean, I kind of was pushed into being a sales coach all those years ago. But then as time went on, like, I found people to speak to. I found people that, had gotten, past where I was and understood more about it and were able to look back and give help. But it's something that I continue to do today. Because ultimately at the end of the day, kind of makes the world go around in a big way. And people really do want to
Yeah.
help and they really want to be there for you. Some of the questions that came in, and then, we'll end with this. One of them was, how do you suggest showing people an example of how you could make their stuff better without coming across as patronizing or insulting?
Very good question. So I'm very careful with how I do this. And someone once suggested to me, why don't you just go through one of the local Jewish magazines and choose a terrible ad and rewrite it? And I was like, because I probably know the person who wrote it. Like, it's too small of a world. I can't risk like sure, I want to showcase my skills, but not at the expense of bringing down someone else. That's the worst thing you can do. I think that it helps when you're super, super far removed. If I can take an ad from, I don't know, Dove soap and rewrite it, no feelings are being hurt. Really, no feelings are being hurt. I mean, you take someone that you're so far removed from, and sure, you can pitch it to them. Maybe they'll even want to use it. Who knows? Crazier things have happened. But if there's even a chance that it will be patronizing, and that's why it's a very good question, don't do it. It's not worth it.
Right.
That's not the way that people are going to come to you. So I really try to remove myself from that situation. And sometimes it's also just about creating brand new content. Like, let's say when I first started doing spec ads, I would choose random connections of mine on LinkedIn and write them an ad. I didn't tell them I was doing it. I learned afterwards that I probably should give them a heads up that I'm doing it. But I would just, and maybe they've had ads written for them before, maybe not, but nothing about what I was doing was knocking what they had. It was just like, hey, I love your business. I think this is a really cool way to showcase what you do. And people appreciate that. So if you're going to compare it to other work, then make sure that you're super far removed from that and that the chances of anyone's feelings being hurt or business taking, a blow because of that, stay very, very far away from that. There are so many ways to do it in a positive way.
Yeah. And I think that it's a very good point that you're making, in the sense that the idea here isn't to put down something that's already out there. The idea is to take what they stand for, what you understood about them and their brand, and create your own thing out of that and say, hey, I love what it is that you're doing. This is something that popped into my head that I thought you'd appreciate. Love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah,
And they
exactly.
might say, hey, I'd love to pay you for this. They might say, I absolutely hate your guts. And they might say, hey, I'm curious to hear more about what it is that you do. Who knows? But you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. That's what Wayne
Exactly.
Gretzky said. So it's always worth doing it. Just like Mrs. Kaplan said, try to do it in that positive spin. And then another question that came in, which I think is really important, is after those first few projects, any idea how to find leads to pitch? How do you find new people to talk to?
You have to be willing to go out of your comfort zone. This podcast that I was listening to yesterday, I like it because now it makes me sound like I'm someone that listens to podcasts regularly. There was one I listened to last night and I didn't even finish it. But she was saying how she doesn't even call it the comfort zone. She calls it the familiarity zone because it's not comfortable.
Mm,
Doing it, at the end of the day, like, it's sure it's not comfortable venturing out, but it's really uncomfortable feeling like you're not doing anything. You have to get out of your familiarity zone. There are 8 billion people in the world, last I checked. Probably since I checked, a few people have been born, died, all that stuff. But there's a lot of people. You have to go outside of your, 4 feet this way, this way, this way, and just your family and friends. Those are great ways to get your first clients, and not even just your first clients. But you have to be comfortable pitching and talking to anyone. And again, if your people are on LinkedIn, if your ideal client is a sales coach, right, like you, if you put into LinkedIn in the search bar with quotes, sales coach, anyone with sales coach in their title will come up and you have no excuse not to be finding leads that way. And again, like you said, we're not in charge of the results. So might you reach out to 2,000 people and 1.5 people respond? Sure. But that's nothing to do with you. So there's no shortage of people if you're willing to step out of your comfort zone and get a little bit uncomfortable.
yeah, and I think it's a very important point, in the sense that ultimately one of the biggest pieces is understand who is your client, understand where they hang out, and how they want to be spoken to, and what you need to say to them.
Yeah.
Right? It really doesn't take too much to do that, as long as you're willing to put in the work. And then you'll learn by trial and error, right? Like you said, put their information, the title of the person that you want to find into the search bar on LinkedIn, and then start talking to people, create relationships with them, find out what they're excited about, what are their concerns, what are the questions they might have. Talk about
Mhm.
that in your content, in the engagement, in the contents, in the comments on their posts, all that type of stuff. Just show up, right? And when you do that, with God's help, the results will follow.
Right. And also understand that it's not just about getting your first few clients. I've been doing this for 4 years, and you thank God have built up a great client base. And I feel very, very grateful for that. I'm still always looking for new people that I want to be working with. And that's kind of part of what we discussed in the beginning, like the unexpected part of freelancing. You
Hmm.
don't necessarily realize that like business development and networking is like a forever game. You never stop with that. Just because you have a
Yeah,
successful
same.
business doesn't mean you get to take a step back. And I'm still doing that. I'll still spend time on LinkedIn figuring out like, okay, who do I want to work with and how do I get to work with them? Who's my ideal client and where do I find him? So it's not just about getting um those first few leads.
Yeah, agreed. Same thing here. And I see it every single day. Like when I'm doing the consistent, actionable things that I need to be doing, that's when I see, much more success than when I'm taking a more laid back approach and just like twiddling my thumbs, waiting for people to come and
Exactly.
say, "Hey, I need your help." This has been super, super impactful. I always like to point out, I mean, I have a page of notes here, and if I were to try to implement every single thing that we spoke about today, even as someone like myself, I'd probably fall flat, break my nose, and it would probably be really ugly scene. I
Bloody.
would suggest, as I do at the end of every podcast, take slow, small steps. Find one thing that we spoke about today that you think is at the top of that list. Start there, let it sink in, make sure that you're implementing it on a daily basis, and then take the next step. Don't try to do everything at once. Mrs. Kaplan, I know right before we jumped on, you mentioned that you had an offer for anyone who is here or listening to this podcast. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So like I said, and I guess this is for people who actually stayed on this long and didn't just jump off. Um, but like I said, I love helping other freelancers, copywriters, non-copywriters. And it's something that I do, and it's something that I um, have done very, very successfully. And because my journey, this whole career was kickstarted by the generosity of others, I love giving back. So anyone who's here or anyone who's listening to the recording, if you have any questions, if you want to get on a free 15, 20-minute call and talk out a specific client problem you're having, a specific freelance problem you're having, send me an email, find me on LinkedIn, Adina Kaplan, or my email is adina@adinakaplan.com. And that's something that I would be so, so happy to talk to you about. Alternatively, you can schedule a 75-minute consultation call or a critiquing call, whatever it is that you need. Send me an email, DM me on LinkedIn, tell me what your needs are. We'll figure out if this is something I can help you with. And if you tell me that you came from this podcast, then I'll be very, very happy to give you a discount. And don't be afraid. Reach out with questions, because if chances are you're not the first one to be dealing with the problem that you're dealing with, then you probably won't be the last. So there's no reason you have to figure it out for yourself. Do yourself a favor and be okay asking people for help.
Absolutely amazing. And myself as well. In these live podcasts, we like to speak about things that are timely, interesting, that you can add to your skill set toolbox. If you want, you could reach out to me as well. I've put my contact information into the chat, and you can feel free to hit me up for a 30-minute free strategy session to take your sales game to the next level, understand any questions you might have had today or anything else you might have questions about. Mrs. Kaplan, again, thank you so much for coming
Thank you
on.
for having me.
I was inspired. I know that it has been super impactful, and many people within the chat have said the same as well. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And to everyone else who's here, thank you so much for coming on. Looking forward to speaking to you this coming week. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.